When people think about old trade routes, they picture busy markets, spices, silk, and caravans moving like a slow river across open land. They don't picture the quiet hours after sunset, when the road emptied and the cold settled in. But for merchants, the night was as important as the day. If you slept badly, you walked badly. If you froze, you got sick. If you got sick, your goods could spoil, your animals could weaken, and your whole trip could fail. Most merchants tried to end each day near some kind of shelter. Along famous roads there were inns, roadside lodges, monastery guest rooms, and the caravanserai built for travelers. A roof didn't always mean comfort, but it meant the wind was weaker, and wind was the thing that stole heat fastest. Even so, you could not always reach a safe place. A lame mule, a broken strap, a swollen river, or bad news about bandits could force an early stop. So merchants learned to carry their night with them the same way they carried water, as something you prepare for early. Warmth started with clothing. A wool cloak was not a fashion choice. It was a traveling tool. Wool held warmth even when it was a little damp, and it could be wrapped tight around the body. Many wore layers, a thin shirt close to the skin, then wool, then something to block wind, like leather or felt. A cap mattered more than people think, because a cold head makes sleep shallow. Gloves, even rough ones, protected fingers so a person could still work in the morning. Socks mattered too. A merchant might have one sleep pair kept as dry as possible, because dry feet could be the difference between rest and misery. The ground was another enemy. People learned this quickly on the road. The earth pulls heat out of you. If you lie on bare ground, your warmth drains away and your back aches by morning. So the first task at any stop was to make a base. If you had a sleeping mat, you rolled it out. If you did not, you made one. Dry grass, reeds, leaves, straw, spare cloth, even empty sacks could become a layer between skin and soil. In stony country, merchants cleared a patch of sharp rocks and laid down whatever they could find. Some used saddle blankets under their shoulders and hips because those spots hurt first. Others used spare rope to tie bundles into a flatter pad. Then came the wind problem. In the open, merchants looked for a place that naturally broke the wind, the lee side of a hill, behind a stone wall, near a stand of trees, beside a low bank. They avoided hollows where cold air gathered, and they avoided ridge tops where wind hit full force. If they had packed loads, they used them like a fence, bales, crates, and saddlebags were stacked into a low barrier, and the sleeping spot was tucked behind it. It wasn't elegant, but it raised the temperature around the body by cutting the draft. Even a small barrier mattered when the air turned sharp. Fire helped, but fire brought choices. A large, bright fire was warm, but it announced your location. In unsafe areas, caravans made small fires screened with rocks, or they cooked early and let the flame die down before full dark. In places where wood was scarce, they used what they could: dry brush, broken twigs collected during the day, sometimes dry dung on grasslands. The aim was not to roast. It was to heat hands, warm a pot, and take the sharp edge off the night. Many travelers saved fuel for a second small warming later, not all at once. A quick reheat at midnight could calm shaking and help people fall asleep again. When they reached a caravanserai or a crowded inn, new problems came. A stone building could hold cold like a well, and the air inside might be damp from animals and many bodies. The warmth came mostly from people, animals, and small fires or lamps. Merchants chose spots away from doors, because doors leaked cold all night. They also chose spots away from smoke if they could, because smoke made eyes and lungs hurt and made the next day harder. In many places, animals slept under the same roof as people. This was not strange to them. Animals gave off heat, and their bodies made the air less icy. People might sleep close to their own animals, partly for warmth and partly so no one could quietly lead them away. Security always shaped sleep. A merchant carrying valuable cloth or metal could not simply fall into deep rest. Caravans set watches. 1 or 2 people stayed awake at a time, wrapped in cloaks, listening for footsteps or animals spooking. Dogs were common on some routes, because a dog hears and smells trouble early. With a watch, the others could sleep longer, which mattered for health. A person who sleeps in fear wakes often, and each waking lets the cold in. With a watch, the mind relaxed enough to rest. There were small habits that made the difference between a tolerable night and a miserable one. Travelers tried not to sweat during the day, because wet clothes became a cold trap after sunset. They ate something warm before sleeping if they could, because a hot meal calmed the body and helped it keep heat through the first hours of night. They loosened belts and tight boots to help blood flow. They kept tomorrow's clothing close, not piled far away, so it would be less stiff and less icy in the morning. They also kept a little dry tinder protected in a pouch, because it is hard to start a fire with numb hands and damp wood. Sleeping was rarely comfortable. It was practical. Merchants learned to accept that they would wake, shift position, pull the cloak tighter, and drift off again. The goal was not luxury. The goal was to wake up with enough strength to load the animals, check the straps, count the goods, and walk toward the next safe stop while the day was still young. By the time a merchant had spent a few seasons on the road, sleep stopped being something soft and private. Sleep became part of the work, like bargaining or loading packs. You learned that cold nights were not all the same. Damp cold near rivers crept into cloth and stayed there. Dry mountain cold bit the face and turned water to ice. Desert cold surprised newcomers the most, because the day could be hot and the night could feel like winter. So an experienced merchant did not rely on one method alone. They carried several habits, and they chose what fit the land without wasting strength. In mountain country, wind was the true enemy. When it rose, it was like someone pulling your blanket away again and again. Travelers tried to reach the trees before night, because below the trees you could find fuel and shelter. If they had to sleep higher, they kept camp low against the ground. A tall tent catches wind like a sail, so many used low shelters. Or they pitched behind rocks and packed snow or loose stones around the edges to stop drafts. They kept water containers closed so they would not freeze solid. Some slept with boots near their chest or under a cloak, because frozen leather in the morning could be like wood. In wet country, the fight was against moisture. If bedding stayed damp, you never truly warmed up. Merchants watched the ground carefully. They avoided bare soil that held water and made cold fog. They chose raised ground, dry sand, or wooden floors when they could get them. If they carried oilcloth or waxed fabric, they spread it under blankets as a barrier. They aired cloaks whenever the sun appeared, even if it meant stopping for a short time. A few minutes of drying could decide whether you slept or shivered. They also learned to keep one bundle strictly dry for night use, even if other clothes were damp. Steppe travel brought a different kind of night. The land was open, and the wind had a long run with nothing to slow it. Here, caravans relied on their animals and packing skills. They might tie horses and camels with their backs to the wind, then sleep on the calmer side. They placed saddles, ropes, and bundles so nothing could blow away. They set up bedding before dusk, because once the temperature dropped, fingers became clumsy and even a simple knot felt hard. If they had felt rugs, they used them like shields, not only under the body, but also as a low wall. Some wrapped a rug around the shoulders like a stiff coat and slept sitting, because lying flat in hard wind could feel worse. In desert country, merchants often traveled early and late, resting during the hottest part of the day. That meant nighttime could be a mix of movement and rest. Desert cold is sharp because heat leaves the ground quickly. Travelers used the sand itself. Some dug a shallow hollow and lay in it, because even a small dip blocked wind. Others built a low wall from saddlebags and packs, then lay behind it. They covered their faces with cloth to warm the air they breathed. They also learned not to waste sweat in the day, because sweat at sunset became a cold film. A dry body slept better than a damp one, even if the damp came from your own skin. Cold nights were managed with routine. In a good caravan, everyone knew the order of things. First, choose the spot. Second, secure the animals. Third, gather fuel and water if possible. Fourth, cook, because cooking creates warmth and light, and it must be finished before full darkness. Then, check gear and goods, because you do not want to discover a cut strap at dawn. Only after that did people settle into sleep. This order mattered because it prevented panic. Panic makes you rush, and rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes become danger on a cold road. Merchants use small tricks to keep heat through the hours. They put items that must not freeze, like ink, salves, or certain medicines, inside clothing near the chest. They warm stones by the fire and wrap them in cloth to make a crude heater for an hour or two. They kept a pot ready to reheat quickly, so morning tea or broth was not a long struggle. They slept with knives and tools within reach, not because they expected a fight every night, but because searching in the dark with numb hands can turn a small problem into a disaster. And they learned to sleep in their layers instead of piling everything under the head, because warmth belongs on the chest and belly first. Even under a roof, comfort could be limited. In a crowded inn, the floor might be hard and dirty, and strangers might be inches away. Merchants learned to take what they could get. They kept their money pouch tied to the body, often under clothing. They used a folded cloak, a saddle, or a sack as a pillow so the head was higher and breathing was easier. If the room was loud, they accepted broken sleep, but they still protected their core with layers, because a warm chest makes it easier to fall back asleep. They also learned to ignore small noises, because reacting to every sound kept the body tense and made the night feel colder. The morning after a cold night showed who had managed well. Someone who stayed warm could rise and work. Someone who froze moved slowly, argued more, and made careless choices. Experienced merchants treated sleep as protection for tomorrow. They woke before full light, when the air was still quiet. They stretched awake joints. They checked animals first, because an animal that shivered all night needed extra care. Then they ate, because food restarted warmth from the inside. And they moved while their bodies were still generating heat. If you listen to the stories travelers told, you hear that cold nights became a teacher. People remember the night they burned wood to fast and had nothing left at midnight. They remember the time they camped in a hollow and woke covered in frost. They remember the inn where smoke made everyone cough for days. Each memory became a rule. Carry extra cord, keep dry kindling wrapped in cloth. Never trust a clear sky in the mountains, and never let your feet stay wet. In the end, merchants did not defeat the cold forever. They simply learned, night by night, how to pass through it and keep going.